Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our very last webinar of the year, webinar on the innovative process for homegrown harmonized standards. This webinar is an update of the webinar we had already in the past, in September, if I'm not mistaken. So it will give you some more news on this innovative process. My name is Els, and I will be moderating the webinar in the background as usual, which means that you're all muted during the presentations, but you can use the Q&A panel to submit your questions should we have these. We do not promise to make all answers to the questions today, but we make sure that the Q&A report will be available for you as soon as possible. We are also recording this webinar, so the recording together with the presentation will be shared with you also as soon as possible. Should you be on X, formerly known as Twitter, you can talk about this webinar with the hashtag Training for Standards, and Sen can be found at Standards for EU. So without further ado, I think I can give the floor to our first speaker of this presentation. As you can see, we are 4 colleagues today covering the presentations, and first on the slide is my colleague Frédéric. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Els. Good afternoon, everyone. I will try to turn on the camera so that there's a face. Can you see me? Yes, now I think it's perfect. So again, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar dedicated to the new innovative process. So this is the agenda for this afternoon. Brief introduction to remind you what is the innovative process. We will explain why we created this process, what changes, what are the main novelties, how to actually work within the innovative process, how to work within the new steps. And the last part of the webinar will be dedicated to some key takeaways about this new process. So before starting, first slide about glossaries, about elements we will talk about during the presentation. I will not go through all of them, but the idea here is to allow you, when looking back at the presentation, to go back to this page if eventually you need to understand an acronym we have used. So an introduction. The innovative process, as you know, has been approved by BT end of September 2023, and it applies for now to homegrown harmonized standards, which are intended to be submitted to the EC consultant assessment, meaning to submit it to a HAS consultant for a HAS assessment, or to a VHK consultant for work items linked to eco-design that are under DG Energy. This process applies to new work items that were launched for approval as of October 1st, 2023. And so it means that it does not apply to any homegrown harmonized standard for which the new work item was launched for approval before October 1st, and any homegrown harmonized standard which is not intended for submission to the consultant. As well, this new process we will see later, but this new process does not apply to harmonized standard developed in parallel. Important elements to know, we have to go through a 2-steps approach implementation of the process. The IT tools are not fully ready yet for the implementation of this new process, but to start already having an impact on the development of harmonized standard, we decided to start implementing the process with manual exchanges of documents. We'll come back to that later in the presentation. So one thing to remember, 2-steps approach until the IT tools are updated to be fully compliant with the innovative process. And as well, for the parallel work, for the projects that are under parallel development with ISO and IEC, we are in the process of having an agreement with ISO and IEC to have a new process that will fit the parallel development of harmonized standard. But for now, the innovative process we are talking about today applies only to homegrown harmonized standards. why this innovative process? As we will see with the coming figures, it's still challenging today to get a compliant assessment. During the previous HAS contract, we had an average of around 30% of compliant outcome for all stages. It was better for the last stages, but globally, for all stages, we had around 30% of compliant assessment. Under the new contract since January, we have around 16% of compliant assessment. One note, those figures here were the figures we had in September. So it's when we drafted the slides for the first webinar. The latest figures from November are a bit better, but we are around today 20% of compliant outcome for all stages. So better than the figures on screen, but still a long way to go. And so because of that, we think that there's a substantial change that is needed. So the objective of the innovative process is to obviously improve the timely delivery of compliant harmonized standards by doing two things. By shifting the focus and the efforts at the beginning of the development process, so having a mature draft assessment and as well a pre-formal vote assessment, we will come back to that later, as well by introducing the new CCMC Quality Check. Same thing. This will be covered in the coming slide. And again, the innovative process, this innovative process applies for now only to homegrown harmonized standards, which are submitted to the EC's consultant assessment. About the what are the main novelties of the innovative process? So this process is mainly based on two main pillars. So the mature draft concept, that is a draft that is ready for inquiry, but not yet submitted for inquiry. The mature draft assessment becomes mandatory within this process. In the previous process, in the actual harmonized process, the first working draft assessment was optional. So it's still possible to have a first working draft circulation, but within the innovative process, the first working draft assessment is not possible anymore. It's only the mature draft assessment. The second main pillar is the CCMC Quality Check, with the goal of the CCMC Quality Check is to help technical body identify elements in the draft or the annexes that could potentially lead to a lack of compliant assessment. And this CCMC Quality Check will use the new common checklist as a support document. Same thing, we will see that more in detail in the coming slides. And this new common checklist replaces the previous harmonized standard checklist that was mandatory. And this new common checklist is obviously still mandatory. So again, innovative process based on two main pillars. And really the idea here is to shift the focus and put a lot of efforts at the very beginning to increase the chances of having a compliant assessment by the end of the development of the harmonized standard. This is the complete timeline of development of a harmonized standard. I will not go into the details because we will come back to the details later in the presentation. But already here we can see that we have the quality check. So the first part here of the development, we have the quality check on the mature draft. The quality check has to be performed in 3 weeks. Then once the quality check finalized, it is sent back. The outcome of the quality check is shared with the TC. Then the TC has here has 4 weeks to address the comments from the quality check. Once the draft and the annex is updated, those elements are submitted again to CCMC for the mature draft assessment. The mature draft assessment is normally 35 days. And once the assessment report available, it is shared with the technical committee. And then there is 4 weeks for the technical committee to update once again, the draft and the European annexes before the submission to the inquiry phase here. And this part A2 is the confirmatory inquiry assessment in case there's a lack of compliance for the major draft assessment. We will come back to it later in the presentation. For the formal vote part, it's the same principle. A quality check is performed on the pre-formal vote draft that is ready to be submitted for the formal vote. Once all the elements and the comments from the quality check addressed, the formal vote is submitted, the formal vote draft together with the annexes is submitted for the pre-formal vote assessment. And the final assessment here is the last confirmatory assessment that is optional and only in case there would be a lack of compliant assessment at pre-formal vote. As you can see here, all the assessments have to be performed before the draft is submitted for the formal vote. That way, the TC can address all the comments from the HAS consultant, even if the comments are related to technical aspects. So here is a recap of the different steps within the process. So as I was saying, 3 weeks for the quality check, 4 weeks for the TC to consider the comments from the quality check, the HAS assessment, that is 5 weeks, and 5 weeks, sorry, I said 4 weeks, but it's 5 weeks for the TC to revise the draft following the assessment report before the draft is submitted for the inquiry. Same thing for the pre-formal vote. And then in case of lack of compliance at formal vote, for the LCA, it's 5 weeks assessment normally, and then 3 weeks for the TC to consider and revise the draft following the comments from the HAS consultant. Again, we will come back to that more in detail later in the presentation. Now we will go into the how to interact and how to implement the novelty within the innovative process. The first element is about the planning, and for that I will leave the floor to Alberto, who will tell you more about the impact on the planning. Alberto, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Frederic, and good afternoon to all participants. I hope that you can hear me well. As we have already several questions that we can tackle at the end of the next slides, so that you can have so that we can clarify your doubt before proceeding. So all the principles of the new process explained by Frederic, of course, will have a start, and the start is when a new work item is launched for approval. Next slide, please. We can maybe come back 2 minutes on the principle of the flexible process, which is a process introduced in 2020, where the main goal, and next, exactly, and another one, exactly, where the main goal is to make flexible these 2 stages that you can see here in the red circles under the TC work. You may remember that the previous timeline was a fixed time of 34 weeks for stage 1 and 34 weeks for stage 2, so a total of 68 weeks. Now the flexible process is basically using the same maximum amount of weeks, maximum 68, but the TC can decide how to split these number of weeks between stage 1 and the stage 2. So these are the general principle of the flexible process. Next slide, please. Now, considering what you can see here on the screen, which is the new timeline of the new process, and the next slide, please click. Yes, exactly. Under the first stage, at the moment, considering that the IT improvements will not be there in at the moment and for 2024. In the first stage, the first red circle, the quality check will take place together with the review of the comments of CCMC Quality Check done by the technical committee. And then in yellow, there will be a first assessment on this matter draft. And then again, there will be the possibility for the technical body to improve the draft before submission to inquiry, which means to CCMC editing, translation, and during translation, the second confirmatory assessment. So the rationale of the BT recommendation is that if you work on a brand new standard, you should consider to reserve more time under stage 1, because the number of activities have increased, and the quality check, as shown before, can take up to 3 weeks. The time for the TC to review the draft is 4 weeks. The assessment, so the yellow box A1, is 5 weeks, and of course we trust and we will request the Commission to be to provide timely the assessment report, and then again 5 weeks for the technical body to review the document before the delivery to CCMC for the editing, in order to address as much as possible the comments during the first assessment. So please click again, so next and next. So the recommendation for when working on a new standard is fix 50 weeks under stage 1. Of course, will be by default the difference between 68, which is the maximum, and 50 will be presented in stage 2. And you can take a tolerance in stage 2 in order to be able then to accomplish the tasks in stage 2. How to do it practically? Next, please. So for CEN technical officers, you go in the CEN Projects Online working area. What you can see is the default timeline. So you can notice that you have from 1099 to 26, which is the circulation of the first working draft, 17 weeks, plus 17 weeks up to the dispatch of the inquiry draft, which means 34 weeks, and 34 weeks before 4599. So I guess that all the TC secretaries, CEN TC secretaries, are now familiar with this default proposed timeline. And of course, you have to click on the calendar there because it is editable. And next slides. And you, next please. Again. And you select a date in order to have 25 weeks, and no more 17 and 17 for a total of 50 weeks, which is the recommended time for stage A. Next. And then by default, the system for 4599 will show the remaining 18 weeks. Now, 50 weeks is a recommendation of the BT. It's not mandatory. So the main rationale of the flexible process is that the technical body officers, meaning the TC secretary with the TC chair, in coordination with the working group convener, have the possibility to plan whatever time they need according for each work item. So you can customize any work item according to the specific need. So in case of a revision of a standard, of course, you can also use a different number of weeks. So you don't need to stick to 50 weeks. In case of amendment, of course, this is obvious that you can choose whatever number of weeks. Take into account, in any case, that the new processes, which means CCMC Quality Check and subsequent TC review, assessment of the consultant plus subsequent TC review, take at least 17 weeks. So plan a time and then add 17 weeks in order to fix the time to 3099. Next slide, please. Now for Senelec officers, of course, they cannot use a working area. Soon, by Q1 2024, there will be a new system for Senelec for approving and managing new work item, the approval of new work items. At the moment, you have still to use the Senelec new work item form, where you will add the recommended number of weeks, as you can see here in the example, 50 weeks plus 18, and the same goes for, next slides, for the JTCs. Even if JTCs and Senelec joint technical committees, even if those under Sen Secretariat, today have to use the Sen new work item form, which is the first screenshot here on this slide, the first on top, and the one below is basically the same when there is a project of the JTC with the Senelec work item lead. Again, as I said before, 50 weeks is not a mandatory duration, is recommended by BT in order to perform all the tasks that are foreseen under this stage. Next slide. Here there is a suggestion. When asking for the tolerance, let's say that this new process has been designed in order to increase the number of positive assessment during inquiry. So it's the A2, assessment A2, which is now called the inquiry confirmatory assessment. In case of lack of compliance during this A2, so inquiry confirmatory assessment, of course, it means if there is a lack of compliance, the formal vote cannot be skipped after inquiry, and therefore the technical committee has to address the comments of the consultant, plus, of course, all the comments that comes from national inquiries, and in order to prepare the draft for formal vote. You can already ask for the tolerance the moment you receive the information that the inquiry confirmatory assessment is lack of compliance. Now, next slide, please. This is the second part of the process. So where, of course, so is the stage 2 of TC work that goes from the end of inquiry, from the closure of the inquiry until the preparation of the document for formal vote. And of course, here you will use the tolerance. Just to remind all of you that another principle of the flexible process is that any time that you have planned under stage 1 and you don't use, you will be you will find it under stage 2. Because if you're able to deliver in advance, it means that the editing will start early, the inquiry will start earlier, the inquiry will close earlier, and then you will have more time between the closure, the early closure of the inquiry, and the formal vote, which instead is not brought forward. So anytime, so if you deliver in advance, which is always welcome, you will gain the time that you plan under stage 1, it will be in stage 2. Or, of course, also using the tolerance, the 39 weeks of the tolerance, you can still deliver in advance. You're not obliged to wait for the until the end of the 39 weeks of tolerance. If the document is ready, you can deliver in advance. Okay, Frederick, line back to you, and maybe we can start taking some questions.
Thank you, Alberto. So indeed, before jumping to the next item, we can have a look to the questions we have already.
Yes, the first question is really what you were explaining. Maybe we can go back to the timeline, to the full timeline.
Yes.
There is a clear difference between the inquiry. Exactly. Well, we can use also this one, of course,
yep,
which is identical. So there is a clear difference between the draft that goes to inquiry. So it's the box. Exactly, the red box with written inquiry and the mature draft, because what you believe is ready to be sent as mature draft will be subject to CCMC quality check, subsequent TC review, assessment on the mature draft. So first mandatory assessment on the mature draft by the consultant, subsequent TC review, and then it goes officially in the flow until inquiry. So the final part of the question is, as soon as we have a draft ready for send inquiry, it is submitted, in fact. So now the reality is that as soon as you have the draft ready for send inquiry, this is sent to the compliance team and will be submitted to quality check first, and will start from the orange box QC1. Then, Frederick, question number 2. Does submission to the quality check mean that the committee are not allowed to work on the document until the response from CCMC Quality Check is available?
Well, it's a good question from Inga. I would say that it would make sense to pause the work while the quality check is performed, because we will come back with suggestions, comments, and so it would make sense for you to pause the work while the quality check is performed. And by the way, I didn't mention it, I think I will mention it later. When you request the quality check to CCMC, you should at the same time planify already a work group meeting so that you can discuss the comments from the quality check, and as well the comments received from the major draft assessment.
Then a question from Silvio Sanchez. I hope that my pronunciation is good. And for a work item launched before 1st October 2023, so that in theory does not fall under this new process. And in stage 45, so we are in stage 45, so we are in the second stage for TC work. The TC decides to voluntarily submit the draft to the non-mandatory pre-formal vote QC2. From that point on, is it intended that development will follow the innovative process, including the applicable process requirements? This is a good question, because the project before 1st October 23 are not supposed to follow the innovative process. Now, if I understand correctly your question, you would like that this project is submitted to QC2, which is a mandatory, in the new process is a mandatory assessment. I see in the question is non-mandatory, will be a mandatory assessment. I leave the floor to Frederick to answer whether this can, in a way, enters into the flow, the process of the innovative process.
Yes, thank you, Alberto. So I think this is a very good question from Silvio. So indeed, it will not per se be within the innovative process. It will not be considered as innovative process, but we highly encourage you to submit your draft for a quality check before it is submitted for the formal vote. We will come back to that later in the presentations. for work items that are not within the innovative process and that are not yet submitted to inquiry or formal vote, we encourage you to come to us, to CCMC, to request a quality check, because we will be very happy to help you improve, between brackets, your draft, at least improve related to European legislation. So it will not fall within the innovative process per se, but you are more invited and more than welcome to submit your draft. If not submitted yet to inquiry and formal vote, submit your draft for a quality check.
Yeah, and I have to apologize with Silvio Sanchez because, in fact, I have not carefully read his question. He referred to the pre-formal vote quality check. So indeed, it's not mandatory for those processes that are not included. I was referring to the assessment A3 under the new innovative process that is mandatory. So I apologize, and you made well to clarify this point. So slide 16, total time frame calculation was 25 weeks or 6 months. How does it fit to the detailed calculation of the same slides? So slide 16.
Maybe we can take this one. Maybe there was a typo in the slide. We can have a look. Maybe we can have a look later to this one. We will come back to it at the end. We will have a look to slide 16 because maybe there's a typo there. We will have a look at it.
Okay. So comment from Mick James. What is understand the necessity to produce standards in a timely manner and every effort to be made to achieve this time scale? It really must be remembered that standard draft by working groups, which are made up of volunteers working outside their made employment. The additional processes are adding extra strain of attempting to arrange meetings of working groups. And there is a danger we lose the voluntary workforce of working group members. We can, of course, we understand Mick James' comments, and we need to strike a balance between negative assessments, even a formal vote, unfortunately, and the capability to keep all our experts involved in standardized work. So the innovative process has been designed in order to try to strike this balance. We will see in a couple of years if this worked or not. Frederick, next question is for you.
Yes. So what we can expect CCMC Quality Check to include? It's a very good question, Timo. We will come back to it as we have in the presentation some slides about what we cover within the CCMC Quality Check. So this answer will be answered later. Question from Marie Noel: how we submitted the mature drafts? So I think it depends for the quality check on the mature drafts. This has to be submitted by email. Same thing. We will come back to it in the practical implementation of the innovative process. It will be covered later in the presentation. I will go to David Goss. So, of the 68 weeks available to the TC to develop the text, it appears that 47 weeks now need to be allowed for quality check and subsequent processes. Does this mean that TCs now only have 21 weeks to develop the text instead of 68?
Yes, maybe you can go some slides up where you present all the duration, expected duration of the new stages.
Yes. Here, this one, right?
Yes, exactly. So we can have up to 17 weeks under first stage, and then we can have another 17 weeks under the second stage for TC work. If we include also the LCA, which should become an exceptional option, this may take 8 weeks, and then a total in the second stage of TC work would be 25. So is now I don't know how you get to 47. For sure, can be 17 weeks under stage 1. It can be 17 plus 8, so it's 25 under stage B. In total, if you put them together, is 42. But LCA should become a very exceptional step, because this new system is designed to take or to address any non-compliance as soon as possible, and possibly before inquiry. Please, Frederic.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Alberto. I will come back to the questions.
Thomas Schreiber.
Can harmonized projects which are in preliminary stage be submitted to an optional quality check? Well, I would say it's a tough one. Ideally, Thomas, I would say yes, although due to the workload we will face, you know, we have limited resources within CCMC. And so we will focus really on the projects that are within the innovative process, meaning the projects that are ready to be submitted to inquiry and that have to go through the mandatory CCMC quality check. And so I cannot guarantee that we will have the bandwidth, the resources to perform the quality check on a pre-work item draft. It's a very good idea, but from a resource point of view, I don't think it will be possible.
I think you can continue with the presentation, Frederic.
Yes, indeed. Thanks, Alberto. Thank you, everyone. So, of course, we'll answer other questions. I will go back to the presentation. We will answer other questions later. And now with the following of the, I will go back to where we were at. Yes, so the next steps now are more operational, and it's more about the how. And we will start with the new common checklist. And for that, I will leave the floor to Mauro to present the new common checklist.
Thank you, Frederic. Good afternoon, everyone. After the explanations given by Alberto and Frederic, now I'm going to focus more on one of the main tools for this innovative process. This tool is the ECESOS common checklist. So this new common checklist, the objective and the main goal of it is to support the technical bodies in drafting their harmonized standards in order to increase the assessment compliant chances. This new common checklist is used by the ESOS, by the European Commission and the AS consultants. And the technical bodies will use the same document, as I said before, as the AS consultants. This new common checklist is mandatory as for the 1st of October of 2023. It was already recommended since July, but just as a mandatory effect since the 1st of October. It is a mandatory as well for the homegrown draft harmonized standards developed or starting being developed after the 1st of October. It is still strongly recommended to use this common checklist in every harmonized standards projects under Vienna Agreement or the Frankfurt Agreement. This new common checklist is available, or the template of this new common checklist is available in SAN and SAN-alike WOS. And now I'm going to present it lively, the structure of it. So I'm going to ask for permission to share my screen. I hope that everyone can see it. Yes. So the structure of this common checklist is quite simple. The first part is just an introductory explanations about the scope, the reference about documentation needed for both technical bodies as consultants or European Commission. In the part A, we have an introductory text explaining the phases and stages of the innovative process. As well, the information about the projects, the standard reference, the work item, the stage, the legislation, standardization request, the technical body if it's a SELEC, and if it's a parallel or an homegrown project. As well, on the part A, subpart 1.1, there are a group of 11 criteria that it's more dedicated for the ESOs and the technical bodies, so they can perform self-assessment on different topics in order to improve the quality of the project to be assessed. These criteria are a way to, as I said, guarantee that if the technical bodies and the working groups follow these 11 criteria and fulfill all of them, they have more chances to have a compliance assessment at the assessment. As well, there is a part B1 that it's at part B that gathers all the information about the as consultants assessment. On the part B1, there is a summary of the assessment. The part B2, there is the conclusion, the overall conclusion of the assessment, if it's compliant, lack of compliant or conditional compliant. And in part B3, that it's one of the most important parts of this common checklist. There are 27 criteria where the consultant will explain and will raise all the issues found, if there are any issues found. So to explain and justify why the assessment had a lack of compliance outcome, just on that. So these 27 criteria are very specifically they can present reasons found or issues found in terminology, forward, the scope, in every part of the document that will be assessed. So yeah, this is the part where the technical bodies will find the justifications, as CCMC as well recommends that the technical bodies that during the self-assessment perform in the part A, if they could as well make a check or make a self-assessment considering these criteria, they will even more improve the chances to reach or to receive a compliance outcome in the assessment, because they are checking the same criteria as the as consultant will check. From now, I'm going to stop share, and if you could go again to the presentation, please. Yeah. So this process, the submission of the common checklist from the working group to CCMC should follow different steps. So after the working group should that will have to draft the harmonized standards will have to take in consideration this new common checklist. So the working group will draft the process or the steps to submit this new common checklist to the CCMC are that the working group will draft the harmonized standard that it's in force now. After that, the working group qualified support checks if the draft of the harmonized standards fulfills all the requirements that are cited. After that, the working group qualified supports ensures that the quality check is filled out, the quality check that I presented before. And after that, the working group qualified support or convener will submit these the draft harmonized standards, the common checklist all filled in, and at the inquiry as assessment. After the inquiry as assessment, the last column of the part B3 should be filled with in reply to the comments made by the Ask Consultant at inquiry phase. So what I'm meaning is that at formal vote stage, the TC will have to reply to all the comments that are done by the Ask Consultant in the part B3 of the comment checklist. So all these three documents or three parts should be submitted to the TC secretary, so that the TC secretary should check if these requirements were made, if the checklist is filled out, and if the column is fulfilled in case if it's in the formal vote stage. After that, the TC secretary will submit the checklist to CCMC for the inquiry or formal vote procedure, and at CCMC level will be assessed if the both draft and common checklist were submitted or not. If both of them were correctly submitted, then the inquiry and the formal vote stages will proceed. If not, they will be rejected. All this process is related with the SEN, with the SEN, and in the next slide, please, we will show the same process for the SENELEC. On SENELEC is similar, however, there is only the process will just follow the steps on the left side of the slide. So the working group will draft the harmonized standards. After that, that same working group has to ensure that the documents or the following documents are submitted, and the following documents are the draft harmonized standard, the checklist, the common checklist, and again, if the comments provided by the Ask Consultant on inquiry stage are replied at formal vote stage, and this is only applicable on formal vote stage. After that, the working group will submit to the TC secretary that will have to ensure that the checklist is filled out, and after that we'll submit the draft to CCMC. CCMC will perform the same assessment on if both documents were submitted, the draft harmonized standard and the common checklist. If the common checklist and the draft harmonized standard are submitted, the inquiry and the formal vote stage will proceed. If not, the CCMC will reject, and the TC will have to resubmit both documents. Saying that, we can proceed, and I will give the floor to my colleague Anda.
Thank you, Mauro. Hi, everyone. I will just open the video. So my name is Anda Bane, and I work in CCMC for a couple of years. Right now, I work with Frederic and Mauro in the harmonized compliance team. So we are handling quality check for a couple of months already. Before starting and going into the quality check process, I would like to refresh a little bit our memories that the quality check performed by CCMC is a new step in the development of harmonized standards. And our main goal is to help you to identify elements in the draft, but also in the related annexes that could potentially lead to a lack of compliance. And regarding the main reasons of lack of compliance, I will just go further. EY, our HAS contractor, has shared with us some critical findings, which represent the main reasons of lack of compliance. And I will just highlight those ones with the higher percentages. And as you can see, we have reasons of undated normative references, or due to technical content, or even though the Annex Z is not sufficiently detailed or not properly referred to the relevant legal requirements. Of course, as my colleague Frederick mentioned earlier, the quality check is only performed during the two main pillars, the mature draft stage and the pre-formal vote stage. An important element when we is when we draft the harmonized, the homegrown harmonized standards. The use of the common checklist is mandatory, and it's not only mandatory for the technical committees, but also for us, for CCMC, because this common checklist is represents the basis of our CCMC quality check. As well, we focus on the elements like the internal regulation part 3, the normative references, and also Annex A and ZZ. And I will go further to explain a little bit what are the elements that we focus on and as I said, the new common checklist represents our basis. So we focus more on the normative references, on Annex A, ZZ, depends if it's CEN or CENELEC, on the forward scope, terms and definitions, a neutrality principle. As well, we look at the ambiguities within the text, but not at least the personal data and other editorial aspects. So let's go and check each element together. The normative references, as you saw earlier in the EY critical findings, this has a big impact in the outcome of the HAS assessment. So in order to receive a compliant assessment, these normative references should be dated, active, published, and not subject to formal objection. But as well, they should be normatively referred within the text, giving presumption of conformity. And here I underline the aspect, the connection between the Annex A and ZZ. And of course, we encourage everyone to use the rules that are drafting in the guidance of on normative references in harmonized standards, but also the rules that are drafted in CEN and CENELEC EC internal regulation part 3. The Annex ZZ as well represents a big impact, has a big impact in the outcome of the HAS assessment. And it's very important to reach compliant assessment, as well to follow the correct template. Of course, we have the generic template, which you will find on both pages, as well in CEN and CENELEC, but also we have different templates for each sector. We don't cover all the sectors, but few of them, they are already there. What is also important that the clauses and subclauses which are drafted in the table 1 from ZA and also in ZZ, those should be drafted as requirements and supporting the presumption of conformity. So I encourage you to use shall when you draft the clauses and subclauses in the body of the text, and you refer to the Annex ZA and ZZ. A best practice is to place in order the essential requirements from the directive and regulation as well. The other elements on which we focus are forward scope and terms and definitions. All three must be consistent and clear with the relevant EU legislation. They should not contain requirements, recommendations, or permissions in their text. As well, we focus on the neutrality principle. Here, we definitely not have to, those clauses or subclauses, those should not impose requirements or obligation on or between certain economic operators. And I have here an example, like we saw very frequently requirements are set to an economic operator and its competencies or resources instead of to product design and product properties. The standard shall not contain as well the first, the second, and third party testing obligations. To have a summary, so in a nutshell, the standards shall describe what should be done and how it should be done, while the directive define who should do the action. So this statement is very important when we draft the standards, the European standards. The other important aspects, elements, are linked to ambiguity, personal data, and other editorial aspects. As we mentioned earlier, we should have clear and ambiguous sentences. What does this mean? For instance, using as far as possible, sufficiently strong, or when necessary, or as long as, this should be avoided especially in the clauses which gives presumption of conformity, and as well in the entire text. Information linked to personal data. We should not have such kind of things in the draft text. And I encourage you, if you have any doubts, to contact our colleagues at dataprivacy@censenelec.eu. And last but not least, to follow the Censenelec internal regulation part 3. So right now, I think I should give the floor to my colleague, Frederick.
Thank you, Anda. So let's continue the presentation. And now we will go into the steps in detail. So sit down, buckle up. There will be a lot of information, and we'll try to explain everything into details. If we miss something, or if you have further questions, anyway, don't hesitate to contact us or your CCMC project manager. We will be very happy to help. So let's start. As within the previous harmonized standard process, we still have a maximum of 4 assessments possible per work item. So as we saw, the mature draft assessment is now mandatory, when before the first working draft assessment was optional, highly recommended, but optional. Excuse me. The inquiry confirmatory assessment is optional and will take place only if we have a lack of compliant assessment at mature draft. The pre-formal vote assessment is mandatory, obviously if the draft does not keep the formal vote. And finally, the last confirmatory assessment, LCA, that is optional and that hopefully will become exceptional with all the novelties of the new process. Let's start. So you have your mature draft ready for inquiry, and the very first step is for it to be submitted for the quality check. How to do that? You should submit your draft together with the filled-in common checklist and the annexes. You should submit everything to hsc@censenelec.eu. So this is the harmonized standard compliance team inbox, and we will check that all the elements delivered, that all the elements needed are delivered for the check before we start performing the quality check. As I was saying earlier, we follow a 2-step approach. For now, we exchange documents manually through email, but at a later stage, when the IT tools are implemented to cope with the innovative process, we will go through the submission interface, but for now, email. So all the elements are submitted. The in-check is okay. We have all the elements needed, the draft, all the annexes, the common checklist filled in, then we start performing the quality check. We have 15 working days, 3 weeks to perform the quality check. Once the quality check ready, we send it back to the TC by email to share the outcome of the quality check. Then the technical body officer, the technical body has 4 weeks to consider the comments from the CCMC quality check, and all comments related to IR3 or normative references or elements in the Annex Z shall be addressed. If some comments are not addressed, the TC shall justify through the common checklist, through the template of the common checklist, the comments that are not addressed. It could be, for example, for undated normative references. It could be because there's an agreement with the desk officer from the European Commission. It could be that. Yeah. So, yeah, all the elements following the updates of the elements should be sent back to us through the same inbox, hsc@sensenelec.eu. So all the updated elements, together again with the common checklists for the major draft assessment requests. CCMC will request the major draft assessment to the as contractor or to VHK for eco-design. Once the assessment report available, hopefully after 35 days, the TC secretary will receive an email notification that includes a link to the assessment report. If the major draft assessment is compliant, the TC can proceed and deliver all the elements for the inquiry process through the submission interface. If there's a lack of compliance at major draft, then the TC can call for a meeting with the HAS consultant. We, of course, invite you to ask for a meeting with the HAS consultant to clarify the comments and to make sure that you fully understand all the comments to be able to address them. So the TC addresses the comments from the HAS assessments, and then once all the comments are addressed, all the elements are submitted to CCMC, this time through the submission interface, because the inquiry process will start, the updated draft, the filled-in common checklist again, the filled-in table of comments from the previous assessments to reply to the comments from the HAS consultant, and all the supporting documents, all the annexes, justifications for annexes, and so on and so on. When launching the translation, CCMC will request the inquiry confirmatory assessment to the HAS contractor. So when we have the assessment report available, same thing, the TC secretary will receive an email notification that includes the assessment report. If there's a lack of compliant assessment at inquiry confirmatory assessment, the inquiry won't be delayed. The inquiry will proceed and it will not be stopped. If there's a compliant assessment, or the conditions, sorry, to skip the formal vote are, if there's an inquiry vote, of course, that is positive. If one of the previous assessments was compliant or conditional compliance, or if there was a lack of compliance, if the comments could be easily resolved, if there are no technical changes made to the inquiry draft, and then the TC can decide by simple majority to skip the formal vote and proceed to publication. Now, I think most of the time we will proceed to the formal vote stage. So after the inquiry, the TC, the technical body, will consider the inquiry comment and the HAS consultant comments received from previous assessments. So the drafts, together with the annexes, will be revised, and this will create the pre-formal vote draft. This pre-formal vote draft, sorry, together with the fill-in common checklist and all the annexes, shall be sent again to CCMC for the pre-formal vote quality check. at the same address, hsc@sensenelec.eu. Same thing. Quality check performed within 15 working days, within 3 weeks. Then quality check outcome shared with the technical body officers, secretary. The technical body has 4 weeks to consider the comments, exactly the same steps as for the inquiry phase. And as well, if there are remaining comments related to IR3 normative references, they shall be addressed. And if not addressed, the TC shall justify why they are not addressed. So the outcome of the quality check is as well shared with the TC by email. And then when the updated elements are sent back to us, CCMC will request the pre-formal vote draft assessment to the HAS contractor. After the 35 days of assessment, normally the TC secretary will receive an email notification that includes the assessment report. So it's an email notification with a link to have access to the assessment report. Side note about that, you will soon, normally within Q1 2024, projects online will be updated, and the TC secretaries will be able to access the assessment report through projects online as well. We will inform you about that when projects online is updated. It should be done hopefully by end of Q1 2024. So if the pre-formal vote draft assessment is compliant, great news. The TC can deliver to CCMC the formal vote draft through the submission interface so that the formal vote ballot can start. And before the ballot, of course, there's the editing and the translation. If there was a lack of compliance at pre-formal vote, then we have several options. First thing, the standard development process is put on hold so that the remaining comments can be addressed before the ballot starts. This will allow the TC to address all the comments, even if they are related to technical elements. So the TC can do its utmost, shall do its utmost to resolve the remaining issues and address the remaining issues, and should as well keep informed the CCMC project manager and the editor in charge of the work item. Obviously, if there's a lack of compliant assessment, it is highly recommended to have a meeting with the HAS consultant. You know that to request a meeting with the HAS consultant, you have to use the meeting request tool from EY. You can find the link available on the BOSS pages. Maybe, I think it is available as well in the presentation. And then, if there's a lack of compliance at formal vote, there are different options possible. So within 7 weeks after the reception of the assessment, the technical body shall inform on the chosen way forward. There are 4 options in total. So this is a schematic that explains the different options. I will explain them in the coming slides. But the first one here is if there's a formal vote, if there's a compliant assessment at formal vote, then we can proceed to formal vote. And if there's a conditional compliance as well, because by the way, as a reminder, the conditional compliance is related to issues or comments related to normative references that can be addressable and that shall be addressed before the draft is finalized. So if there's a lack of compliance, we have 4 options. The option 1, no LCA needed, means that the remaining comments can be addressed without requesting an LCA. Option 2, there's an LCA needed, and then if it's compliant, we can proceed to formal vote. If there's a lack of compliance, but the comments can be easily addressed, we can as well go to formal vote. And the option 3 is exceptional. it's when there's a dispute between the TC and the HAS consultants. I will come back to that in the coming slide. So option number one, no LCA. This is an easy option. So given the nature of the comments, the TC thinks that they can be addressed without requesting an SCA. So it can be comments about, for example, undated normative references. So comments that are relatively easy to address. And so in this case, we can go and proceed to formal vote without requesting an LCA. So same thing here, the TC delivers all the elements through the submission interface, the reworked draft in track changes, so that we can easily see what has been done to address the comments from the HAS consultant, filled in common checklist, filled in table of comments from previous assessment, and supporting documents. And then we will proceed for the formal vote ballot. The option number two is when the LCA is needed. If you have a doubt about the comments received at formal vote, and if you are not sure that you have sufficiently addressed the comments from the HAS consultant, we recommend you to go for the LCA so that you are sure that the comments are addressed, or you have at least a confirmation that the remaining comments were sufficiently addressed. Same thing, submission interface, where you submit all the elements to request the LCA assessment, and within the submission interface, you have to specify that you need to request, that CCMC needs to request an LCA, a last confirmatory assessment. Same elements to be delivered. Rework the draft in track changes so that we can identify easily what has been done to address the final comments from the HAS consultant. Filled in common checklist, filled in comments, table of comments from the previous assessment, and all the supporting documents and annexes, and so on. CCMC will then request the last confirmatory assessment to the harmonized standard contractor. If the assessment is compliant, then the formal vote, ballot, and process can resume, editing, translation, and the formal vote itself. If there's a lack of compliant assessment at formal vote, then we go to option 3 and option 4. I will quickly come back to the schematic. And so we are here. If there's a lack of compliant assessment at LCA, we hope that by then that it will be very exceptional. Then we enter this path with the EC HAS technical body concerted group. And we will go to it right now. So if there's a lack of compliance assessment at LCA, there's the option 3 that should be exceptional. So if the comments left by the HAS consultant, if there's no way to resolve them, and if there's kind of a dispute between the TC, the work group, and the HAS consultant, then it's possible to organize a meeting between the HAS consultant, the European Commission, and the technical body, together with the CCMC project manager. Such a meeting could be organized to discuss the remaining comments and to find a way forward. So this meeting is called EC HAS Technical Body Concerted Group Meeting. And again, these meetings should be exceptional. And the goal here is to find a reasonable way forward to address the final comments. If the final comments, the remaining comments are resolved, then the technical body should deliver through the submission interface for the formal vote. Same thing. Reworked draft in track changes, all the supporting elements, the supporting documents, and so on and so on. And the formal vote ballot will resume. If the remaining comments are not resolved, then we go to option 4. And the very last option, we really hope that by then this will be very, very, very exceptional. So when the assessment issues could not be resolved by the technical body at all, a proposal on the way forward is circulated to BT for approval. And then we have 4 options, no, 3 options, I think. So option 1 is to unlink the work item temporarily from the legislation, meaning to remove the link to legislation and Annex Z and initiate an amendment or a revision of the work item in order to address the comments and resolve the lack of compliant assessment. So this is the first option. Second option is to remove permanently the link from the legislation. In this case, obviously, if the work item was listed in a standardization request, the European Commission will need to be informed about it. And the last option is to abandon the project if there's really no way for the comments to be addressed. The project can be abandoned, and obviously in this case as well, the European Commission will need to be informed. In these 3 cases, a BT decision is needed for the way forward. Now, a few elements about ongoing projects. So we talked about it earlier during the Q&A, the short Q&A we had previously. So the innovative process is designed for a new work item launched for approval as of October 1st, 2023. But to already have an impact on ongoing projects and to already try to improve the figures, we invite technical bodies that have projects that are under development and that they are not yet submitted to inquiry and formal votes to contact CCMC and to request to have a quality check performed, done on your draft before it is submitted for the inquiry assessment or the formal vote assessment. So to request a CCMC quality check, you're invited to send all your elements only by email to the harmonized standard compliance team, and we will be happy to perform a quality check on your draft. And so same thing here, the CCMC quality check will be performed in 3 weeks, and the outcome will be shared with you. Voilà, we are almost at the end. I propose we have a short pause before the key takeaway, and we take some questions. I will open the Q&A, and let's see if we can answer some questions here. So, question from Karsten, I hope I pronounce it correctly. Could you please specify what is a proper justification for non-dated normative references? So a proper justification can be, for example, if you have an agreement with the desk officer that you can proceed with a proper justification. Or if you use certain type of normative references, for example, linked to definitions, I think, or nomenclature, then you don't have to date normative references, but a proper justification between brackets is mainly if you have you can have an agreement with a desk officer, and then we can proceed that way. So question about the dated normative references. So this is very difficult when we are drafting at the same time several parts of harmonized standard series. We have cross references that are not published since they are all drafted at the same time, and we have negative assessment saying that the normative references are not published, and we don't know how to write that in the standard. Yes, so Marie-Noël, this is a very good point. And for that, actually, we have the conditional compliance that can apply. So in this case, you develop a series of standards together that are co-referencing each other. And in this case, you can indeed use a draft harmonized standard as normative reference. Contact your CCMC editor to know exactly how to write it in the NXLA, but in this case, you can do it, and you will receive a conditional compliance, meaning that by the end of the development of your drafts, your series of standards, all the normative references used shall be published and available. And in this case, again, the conditional compliance applies, and it can be very well used in this case.
Maybe Frederic, while you continue with the questions, maybe I don't know if Mauro can show on the checklist the possible 3 outcomes.
Yes,
I can share.
One
Yes.
of them being exactly what Frederic just mentioned.
I'm already sharing it.
Yes, we can see it. So it's there at the beginning of this second page.
So, consultant's opinion, we see here conditional compliance only in case of problems related to dates of normative references to other interlinked standards. So it's exactly that. Exactly. When you co-develop a series of standards that are co-referencing each other, in this case, yes, you can receive a conditional compliance during the development, meaning that by the end of the development, all the references shall be available, and then this will be transformed into a compliant assessment if all the normative references are available. Thank you, Omar. There's a question from Paola Vicentin. Is there a definition of neutrality? I guess you're talking about the neutrality principle. The neutrality principle, as Mauro was saying, is it's Anda who was talking about it. You should not refer to any first, second, or third party body. So when you draft your clause, your requirement, it should be neutral. And so we could explain you a bit more in detail if you contact us, if you have a specific question about it. But the idea here is you shall not use the manufacturer shall, for example. The manufacturer shall check that. You can write, it shall be checked that. So the goal here is to be neutral in on the way you draft your requirements. So question from Giovanna Longo: if the quality check done by CCMC requires to change something, there is no time for the committee to meet and agree or consult on the changes. So it's a good question. I would recommend you, before, when you submit your draft for the quality check, I would recommend you to already plan a workgroup meeting to discuss the comments received from the quality check and from the assessment. Because of course, if you receive the comments and then you have to plan the meeting to discuss the comments received, it might be difficult to do that, or it could take some time. So we recommend you to plan your workgroup meetings as soon as, at the latest, when you submit your elements for the major draft quality check. So another question from Marie-Noël: who decides if an LCA is needed after a lack of compliance at formal vote assessments? So Marie-Noël, I would say that it's up to you to decide. I would say that the TC, the experts, are the best placed to see if the remaining comments to be addressed are easily addressable or not. And so I would say it's really up to you to decide if you can proceed to the formal vote without requesting an FCA. If you have questions, of course, don't hesitate to ask your CCMC project manager. But at the end, you are the standard drafter, and you are the best position to decide if you can proceed or not. There's a long question from Andreas, so I propose we take it offline. Question from Joseph Ruoff. So, had some negative feedback from the EC for citation of an already published standard. One of the comments was about the location in the standard where the mandate is listed. Joseph, maybe you can contact us and we will check that offline. It's a specific question. I don't know exactly. I can't answer it here. So please, Joseph, contact us and contact your CCMC project manager so we can have a look at it. So question from Timo. Are there any CEN internal regulation or guide updated, underway or scheduled? I think the internal regulations are up to date. There have been internal regulations part 3 have been updated 1 year ago, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, if there are any updates within the internal regulations or any guide, when there's a guide updated or internal regulations updated, you technical body officer, technical bodies or members or permanent delegates, you are by default notified. Every time there's an update or if there's an update on the boss pages, you are notified that there's an update. So you will be updated if there is an update that is made.
Maybe Frederick, just to inform that the CEN and CENELEC boss pages will be revised, will be updated to reflect the process you just described.
Yeah, thank you, Alberto. Indeed, we are busy working on that. We are busy updating the boss pages, and we will, of course, update you, let you know as soon as the pages are updated. So we go back to the presentation for the final part of it. So some key takeaways, what we should remember about what we discussed today. So as we were saying at the beginning, today there are 2 different processes for homegrown harmonized standards. So there's the harmonized standard process that is applicable to all the work items that were approved before or launched for approval before October 1st, 2023. So those are not within the innovative process, but again, for those work items, you are invited to still request a CCMC quality check on your draft if they are not yet submitted to inquiry and formal vote. And for those work items that were that were launched for approval as of October 1st, 2023, those work items fall within the new innovative process. As said, this new process is mandatory for homegrown harmonized standard, again, launched for approval as of October 1st. The process has been agreed with the European Commission, as well with DG Energy. So the same principle will apply for all the work done under DG GROW and DG Energy. And as mentioned earlier, we still have a maximum of 4 assessments per work item, but the timing and the purposes are slightly different compared to the previous harmonized standard process. The main novelty, one of the main novelty of the innovative process is the quality check that is performed on the major draft before it is submitted for the inquiry. and as well quality check performed on the pre-formal vote draft before it is submitted for formal vote assessment, for pre-formal vote assessment. We really believe that the combination of the CCMC quality check and the assessment at the right timing, so starting early, that it should help technical bodies reach compliance at the end. So again, here, the two main pillars of the new innovative process start earlier to avoid having project blocked at the end because the harmonized process was started late, and therefore at the end the TC can face difficulty to address the comments from the HAS consultant. Here the idea is really to start early and as well to have the CCMC quality check in order to help technical bodies identify elements that could potentially lead to a lack of compliant assessment and think of a way to address them early so that by the end of the development, all the comments are addressed. And so a lot of efforts, more effort at the beginning, and hopefully less effort at the end. Again, two-steps approach, a lot of manual exchanges of documents at the beginning until the IT tools are updated to implement all the novelties of the new innovative process. The new work item form, as Alberto was explaining during the part dedicated to the planning, foresee enough time up to inquiry. So we recommend you to go for 50 weeks for the first part. And as well, if you have a lack of compliance at the confirmatory inquiry assessment, we recommend you to directly request the 39-week tolerance so that you have time to draft your standard. And of course, this is a new process. It's new for everyone. We will really focus on continuous improvement, and the BTs will monitor the success of this new process. And we will, of course, share the evolution and the figures of it, and BT will be informed and will communicate about it. So this process is really dedicated to homegrown harmonized standard, as said at the beginning. A new process for harmonized standard developed in parallel with IEC and ISO is currently under development. We are finalizing it. It will not be exactly the same before there's a time constraint at international level. There will be less back and forth between the technical body and CCMC. The same principle kind of will apply, so we will start earlier. There will be a major draft on the CD, the major draft, a CCMC quality check on the CD draft. But yeah, the final process, when approved, we will inform you about it, and we will organize a webinar and trainings dedicated to this process. And that was it. So the last slide for me is to share some useful links and information. We have organized 1 year ago a webinar dedicated to drafting guidance. It's still very making sense today. You have here the link for the CEN webinar and the CENELEC webinar. So drafting guidance related to drafting requirements, the neutrality principle, for example, best practices about the use of normative references. So those two webinars are still highly recommended today. There was a webinar dedicated to the normative references as well. And in June, together with my colleague Nuno, we organized a presentation on the new common checklist. That was it on my side. Before closing, I will go back to the Q&A to see if you have...
Frederic, I propose we give a couple of minutes to the participants to add any question. Among the answered questions, so those that are answered online in real time by your team very efficiently, there was a question regarding the possibility to skip the formal vote. Can you maybe say something about that, if this is still possible? I think you said it is.
To skip the formal vote, you said?
Yes.
Yes, yes, indeed. It is still possible to skip the formal vote within specific conditions. So first, of course, is to have a positive vote at inquiry. Then to have a compliant assessment either at the mature draft assessment or at the inquiry confirmatory assessment, a compliant assessment or a conditional compliance, and as well to have no comments that needs to have a technical change. So if you don't need technical change in your draft, if you have a positive vote at inquiry, and if you have received a compliant or conditional compliant assessment, then there's a possibility to skip the formal vote. This is explained in a slide, so you can come back to that within the presentation. And I see a question from someone in the Q&A. Yes, the slides will be made available to you.
Then there is a question of Silvio Sancese on, can you please give us some detail about the on-hold period? I guess this is the period while we do the quality check.
So I guess Silvio refers to the part where the formal vote is on hold while the technical body addresses the comments from the HAS consultant. I guess so. It's the only part. So when there's a lack of compliant assessment at confirmatory stage, the inquiry is not put on hold. So the inquiry process proceeds. But then if there's a lack of compliant assessment at formal vote, then the formal vote process is put on hold for the TC to address the comments from the HAS consultant. I don't know if this answers your question, Silvio. But the idea here is to put the process on hold and to pause the development until the comments are addressed, so that at the end of the development, the standard, the work item, hopefully receive the compliant assessment, or another way forward is found, and the TC can proceed and go till the end of the development of the work item. I see a question from Alexandra. The Commission also has a regulation or some kind of document on harmonized standards. Can you please clarify your question, Alexandra? I don't fully get, because yeah, the Commission has the Vademecum, of course, the regulation 1025, that is the base of the harmonized standards. But Alexandra, maybe you can contact your CCMC project manager if you have further questions.
Maybe we can add there, Frederick, that the main objective of the new checklist is to have a common checklist with the Commission and the consultants. So we avoid different, I would say, understandings and interpretations of the clause. So the main objective is exactly to avoid different piece of guidance that would reflect one party point of view.
Yeah, it's a very good point, Alberto. Thank you for talking about it. Indeed, so the new common checklist, we call it common checklist, but actually it's a new template that it's used by by everyone, the European Commission, CCMC when performing the quality check, the TC for performing their self-assessment, and the HAS consultant for assessing the standard and delivering the assessment report. So the name can slightly change, but the idea is indeed to have one common document, one common template used by everyone, so that at the end it helps you, the TC, the standard drafter, so you can see on what criteria your work item will be assessed. And the HAS consultant, when delivering the assessment report, he will use the very same template that you used for your assessments, for your self-assessments before delivering all your elements for the quality check. And we think that it's going to be really helpful for you to see on what criteria the HAS consultant will assess your work item. There's one question here from Olivier. What are the main differences between the quality check and the assessment? It's a very good question. So the quality check will focus on horizontal aspects that are non-technical. So, for example, the dating of normative references. We check that the correct template have been used. We will check that the requirements are drafted as a requirement, elements like that. The HAS consultant on his side, she will check the technical content of the standards, and will check that those technical content requirements are in line with the European legislation. At CCMC, we are not experts. You, in the technical bodies, you are the expert, and the HAS consultant is there to check if the technical solution you found is in line with the European legislation. So the quality check and the HAS assessment are two ways that will help you, hopefully, improve between brackets your draft, improve your draft on elements, of course, related to European legislation. Question from Anne Min. HAS consultants have a limit for the meetings? What if we cannot have one? I don't know if I fully understand your question. So you can request a meeting with the HAS consultant every time you have an assessment report. So
maybe you can go in the meantime, Frederick, on the timeline, so also participants can visualize it.
Yes, I will go back. Sorry, there are many clicks, but there's a lot of information. Almost there. Yes, I will use this one. So here you see we have a maximum of 4 assessments. And every time you receive an assessment report, you can call for a meeting with the HAS consultant to discuss the comments. And by the way, within the new contract, within the new HAS contract, there's the possibility to have more communications with the HAS consultants. Within the previous HAS contract, there was a split of 80%, 20%, 80% dedicated to the assessment work and 20% dedicated to communication. Within the new HAS contract, it's 75-25, meaning 75% dedicated to assessment and 25%, so more time allocated to communications and meeting with the HAS consultant. So normally, you should be able to ask meetings with the HAS consultant following an assessment report. And we recommend you to book the meeting at least 4 weeks ahead of the targeted date for the meeting. Yeah, sorry, I follow up your question. I see that you commented. So by contract, they have a certain number of meetings allowed per year. No, so yeah, indeed. So within the previous contract, we had a budget issue at the end because indeed, it seems too many meetings were requested. Within the new contract, from what I understood, the Commission is following it more closely. And normally, we should be able to have a meeting with the HAS consultant following every assessment report. And normally, you can request a meeting with the HAS consultant, and if you ask 4 weeks ahead of time, you should be able to have the meeting with the HAS consultant. And as well, when you request a meeting with the HAS consultant through the EY meeting request tool, normally the HAS consultant has 48 hours to answer, to say if he or she is available or not. But if you have issues, difficulties to reach your HAS consultant, please contact your CCMC project manager. He will come back to me, to us, and so we can arrange that. Next question from Joseph. Once the standard is published but refused by the EC for citation, what are the next possible steps? So one possible solution here would be to go for an amendment to address the remaining comments, but here, Joseph, I would say the same. It's really case specific. And I would invite you to discuss with your CCMC project manager if this happens, to find the best way forward possible for the specific case and the specific work item. Yes, and that's it. So again, the question from Andreas, sorry, but it's a bit long and it's quite late already, so we will take this offline. We will come back to you on that.
Okay, Frederick, I think.
Yeah, I think we are almost
to
the end of the presentation to display the last slides.
In the meanwhile, I've opened already the poll. It's a feedback poll for all the attendees. So I've seen that many of you already replied to the poll. Thank you very much for that. We actually use the answers to improve our future webinars and to have an idea of how satisfied you are, of course. So if you have not yet replied to a poll, please do so, and we can take your answer into account as well. Okay.
So I think that was it on my side. I thank you very much for your attendance, for your attention. Again, please don't hesitate to contact us, the HSC team, or your CCMC project manager. We are here to help and support, and we will be very happy to address your questions, to answer your questions. So really, don't hesitate to come to us. I personally wish you a very happy holiday season already, and looking forward to meeting you next year, probably. Thanks a lot. See you.
Thank you, Frederick, and thank you to you, Anda, Mauro, and of course, Alberto in the home offices. And for me as well, best wishes for the new year. And if I'm not mistaken, on the very last slide, I've put an overview of our upcoming webinars. So we're already ready, almost ready for January, because we have a few webinars that might interest you as well. So as promised, you will receive still today the presentation and the recording in your inbox, which gives you the possibility to click on the hyperlinks should you wish to register. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.